Taravavai Tejasrinavaditamastu ma Vishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace.
Oh, yes, what a wonderful way to begin the day on January, what is it, the 23rd? 22nd of this new year. Peace, peace, peace. So, Swami, where are we this evening? I don't want to know about Hollywood. Yeah. But what do you think we're up to? I have a couple of pages left.
All right.
And I think maybe you'll tell me it's true. In our chapter on God, our Eternal Mother, which is the title of chapter 10 of which volume, Swami? Swami Abhedananda's complete work.
Seven,
yeah. And this is quite important to us in very many ways. The birthday of our Holy Mother, which is at different times of year, because it's on the lunar calendar. I remember it's being on December 26th, for example, was in January this year. So ironically, in the year 2020, there was no observance of Holy Mother's puja in that year, because one was December and one January. And what I think I'd like to start us off with is the understanding, because India is involved in these incredible circles of thought and understanding and mythology and all, that the Indians are pretty clear in their history, that is to say, the actual Indian superluminaries that have come from time to time, that when there's a manifestation of a God-soaked man, we call them men of God, we call them God men. They walked with God, they come with such, drenched with such spirituality that they themselves will say, I and my Father are one. Now in India, in their vast eons of time, thousands of years, they always come as a pair. This is very interesting. If you were to take a picture, some of us are more into thinking of a naturalist, because we came in this country 3 million by 3,000 by 1,000, about 3 million square miles, lots of animals. And so we're all imbued with that nature ever since the earliest days of the people from Europe coming and plunging ever deeper into the forest, moving westward. So if you take a picture of a lion, nice, beautiful picture of a lion, and this is going to be the lion. The lion for the book, for the children's book, and something sacred about it to the Native Americans and to the Americans. We're all kind of John Muir mystics. That's not a lion. If you take a picture of a lion and call him, I'm quite sure the genus and species is Leo. You have to have a male lion and a female lion, and if you're going to send it to outer space past Jupiter and Saturn and hope it reaches this planet and some other culture, you better have a baby lion there too. I suggest. Submit. Then you can put underneath Leo. There's no other way to speak about a human. So, if Mother always comes, and it's not that often that we have a record, but in the Indian mythology or the Indian spiritual realm, when Daddy comes, then you've got a most interesting situation going on. Because each is equally fully illumined. Each, in one's own way, represents the whole, which for now we can call Brahman. And one represents, as it might well be, the tender, all-encompassing, very imminent, very immediate form of the Divine Spirit in the form of Mother. So we say God immanent, God the light of the universe, God the goddess of the dawn, Mother Earth, and Daddy. Well, we could say, in mythology we could say, well, let's call it the Sky Father. Sky Father, the Transcendent, Shiva sitting in the Himalayas, covered with ash, eyes closed, seeing the light of 1,000,000 suns within. And Mother helping us along the way every day by inspiration, care, and the stepping stones, which we call Vidya, wisdom, that lead us to union with God. So, Swami, may I start off with a little bit and see what happens? All right. Another wonderful result of this conception of God as the Mother, capital M, of the universe is that when a man worships God as his mother, he always thinks of himself as a child in its mother's arms. As a child does not fear anything when it is near its mother. So the worshiper of the Divine Mother, that's capital D, capital M, is never afraid of anything. Anything. He sees the Blessed Mother everywhere. And that, of course, is where India's too much, you know. It's a whole other universe of a panoply of sound and light and spirituality. And they actually have round buttons. We have one, and it's called a tuit. It's called a round, T-U-I-T. And so we wear it and say, you know, when I get around to it. In India, they have buttons, the boys. They do. For example, in Billermont, some of our students, for example, saying, "Mother, make me a man." So, never afraid of anything. He sees the Blessed Mother everywhere. In every woman, he sees the manifestation of his mother, capital M, and that can be very literal. When Swami Prabhupada saw Holy Mother, which he did on, let's put it, more than one occasion, he felt that he was in the presence of his own mother. Consequently, every woman on earth is his mother. He conquers all lust and sense desires. He sees woman in a different light. He worships every woman mentally. I've seen a man who lived on this earth. Aha, now here Abhedananda's getting up some power, here's some steam. Like a living child of the Divine Mother, being always protected and taken care of by her. And when they get down to symbology, and they know it's symbology, and they know that the infinite is beyond anything that we can touch, and, you know, stuff like that. See, they have images. Oh, I'd like to think about it this way. She will have more than one hand, more than two, 4. And 2 of them are hands of blessing. The other 2 are hands of protection. So he worshiped God. Now think of that. It's for the beginning of this new millennium. And that's God. With a G-O-D, capital G, as the Mother, capital M, of the universe. Through that worship, he became pure, righteous, and spiritual. Now, I'm not quite sure why I see quotation marks here, Swami, or the first ones anyway, end quotes.
Probably a mistake.
Yeah. His Divine Mother showed him the true nature of man
Another one in the next line.
and woman. In other words, she was everything, and everything to him. I love that phrase. Did you ever hear that? That's great. I pick these things up wherever I can. to the whole world, you may be one person. But to one person, you may be the whole world. That's the case in the case of the Divine Mother.
You skipped a line.
Did I? All right.
He used
So
to say,
now we got those four. He used to say, "My mother, thou art all in all," and he was talking to her, who was a living, moving, person. His Divine Mother showed him the true nature, think of this, of man and woman. He used to bow down before all women and young, mature, and old men and said to them, quote, "You are the living representatives of my Divine Mother." And, brother, that's all I can read. You're going to have to read from there on in for a while. That's a big statement.
Yeah, there's actually another little part of that sentence.
Good.
My mother, thou art in all. Thou art my guide, my leader, and strength. And there's a misprint there, so if you can fix that.
There you are.
Okay. He used to bow down before all women and young, mature, and old men and say to them, "You are the living representatives of my Divine Mother, the Adya Shakti on earth. How can a child have any other relation to one who is the same as its real mother?" By this kind of devotion, he conquered all lust and worldliness. His childlike, whole-souled, and rapturous self-consecration to the Divine Mother is a landmark in the religious history of India. His whole life, which was the personification of purity, self-control, self-resignation, and filial love to the Divine Mother, stands as a mighty testimony to the reality and effectiveness of the worship of God as the Mother of the universe.
Now, frankly, I don't know about y'all, but I do think you could stop there, take a deep breath, and sit in silence for 3 hours. So, Swami, if you don't mind, would you read that last sentence again?
His whole life, which was the personification of purity, self-control, self-resignation, and filial love to the Divine Mother, stands as a mighty testimony to the reality and effectiveness of the worship of God as the Mother of the universe.
Yes. And the word is filial, Swami. I'm not sure. Very powerful thing. All right. When he used to sing the praises of the Divine Mother, he gave life to every word he uttered, and no soul could hear him without being moved to tears by deep devotional feelings, without realizing that this wonderful child was in direct communion with his Divine Mother. Now, this is supposed to be kind of freedom time. Some people, tuning in on us here, good evening, world. We have a little relaxed feeling about these readings on Friday night because they're readings. We're sitting in the presence of the highest, most highly illumined souls, the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So I find that when we're talking in this vein, we might do well to realize that in India, people have visions. Some people have visions. In the history of the West, say from the year zero, there's no year zero. Year zero, we have people who've had visions. Swedenborg was really great at it. William Blake, his father was Swedenborgian, a Swiss, not philosopher, more like a mystic. So nobody told William Blake he couldn't have visions. And as a boy of 4 years old, he saw God's forehead at the window. You see, the bumblebee, every engineer knows and will tell you, is aerodynamically unsound. The bumblebee, Swami, has a tiny little wing that the big body can't fly. The only problem is nobody ever told the bumblebee. So may we, for argument's sake, just exceed, or just that point that, yeah, some people reporting to have visions in India a lot. And Vivekananda, who is so far much grander than all of his devotees, angles of perception views of all of us around the world. This is my shirt. I love it. Got this in Chicago at a meeting of all the Swamis outside of India. Vivekananda. And he said nobody can understand Vivekananda but another Vivekananda. But he said things in his moods and modes like this. He said if a deer was to think of God, he'd see God as a grand deer. So Sri Ramakrishna was in the temple in Bellarmine and Dakshineswar across the river. And he was the priest, and they had an image there, kind of a, I don't know. They knew. I mean, the Indians, give them credit, they know a lot more than they let on, than you think. And they know better than the Westerners who decry them for trying to have a little image to remind you of God, like a Hallmark card at Christmas for those that care to send the very best. Oh, they know that the statue is not God. It's a symbol of God. It's something to make you think of the real, wonderful God. So there was a statue of God as mother. And although this isn't exactly the way it was, he started praying to it. Remember, God was his chosen ideal in the form of mother, which is very important for this new millennium. It's just huge. It's everything. So through praying, through weeping, through this, through that, through everything, eventually, and I don't need to say it, he reported. Let's just say that. I don't have to say it. Jesus said, I and my Father are one. It's Jesus that said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. The statue became living. From then on, he was talking to Mother every day. And she was, if you will, his be-all and end-all. Right? His divine mother showed him that each woman was her incarnation. So he worshipped and honored women as a son might worship his own mother. Swami Abhedananda finds Holy Mother at one point and saw in her a village. I'm getting carried away twice in one night, Swami. That's not right. Woman, mother. And he felt that she was his own mother. And he took the dust of her feet because he felt something. So he saw in her every mother, huh?
Honored, is that?
Yeah, where is that, brother? That's okay, because they're using the English spelling, O-U-R, neighbor, and so forth. Yeah. So he worshipped and honored all women, as a son might worship his own mother. Okay, brother, can you take it from there?
Yeah.
Some Western people?
Some Western people may laugh at such reverence, but a Hindu is extremely proud of it. The Hindus know how to honor a woman. Professor Max Mueller once was much impressed with the wonderful life of this great sage and recently published his Life and Sayings.
And let's leave the head footnote here.
From Life and Sayings of Ramakrishna by Professor Max Mueller, published by Charles Scribner's
Scribner,
Sons.
Scribner. That means a writer.
Scribner's
Scribner,
Sons.
Scribner. He scribed.
Oh, Scribner's,
Yeah.
yes, New York.
I didn't give a date. I thought they might. Okay, but 1920 maybe or something. Who knows?
He was once asked, "If we are the children of the Divine Mother, why does she not take care of us? Why does she not come to us and take us up in her arms?" The sage replied, "A mother has several children. To one she has given a doll, to another some candy, to a third a music box, according as each one likes."
You understand this is Sri Ramakrishna we're speaking about?
Yes,
Okay,
this is the words of
Uh-huh.
Max Mueller
That's right.
quoting Ramakrishna.
There you go.
Thus, when they begin to play and are absorbed, they forget their mother. She, in the meanwhile, looks after her household work. But the moment any one of them gets tired of the play and throws aside the playing, cries for the mother. It didn't make sense. And throwing away the playing, cries for the mother, "Mama, Mama, dear," she runs quickly to him, takes her up in her arms, kisses him often and often, and caresses him. So, O man, being absorbed in your play with the playthings of the world, you have forgotten your Divine Mother. When you get tired of your play and throwing aside the toys, you cry for her sincerely, and with the simplicity of a child, she will come at once and take you up in her arms. Now you want to play, and she has given you all that you need at present.
I'd like to just take a moment there, son, just a moment. But you know, each one of us, I think, that comes at least as far as the orbit is into Vedanta, has a presentiment of God. A presentiment. That's supposed to mean an awareness, a sensitivity, a sentience, a feeling. Maybe hard to define, maybe what, but there is that. And we call this a chosen ideal when it gets a developed form after a few years, perhaps, around here, around Swami. However, that awareness, Swami, that magnet, is extremely important, I would like to suggest. That's my wish to suggest to each person. And we had a young man who was here for some time with us who told the Swami, you know, I think I may have another path, another way. And he went to the seashore to try to re-experience an empathy, a feeling, a presentiment that he had on the seashore. And he came back. And he came back because I have a feeling he was aware that the presentiment of God, which is the real McCoy, that's my thinking, for each person according to where she is and he at the moment, that's the important thing, was something that he had at the seashore, and that somehow by coming back into a community of seekers, practitioners, as we call them, the Desert Fathers left Rome about the year 400 or something when it became legal, earlier than that, to be a Christian finally, because it was getting too soft for them. And went to Africa and sat on anthills and stuff. But within the community of practicing, aspiring people, two things can happen. One is there can be kind of a habit form, just through meditation and practice, whatever, sudden thinking of God as one does day by day. And the other is one can offer service, don't you see, to the manifestation of God in that age, both of which are worship and both of which lead to the awareness of God. Okay, so I'm going to be good now.
It should be remembered that each one of us will see the Divine Mother sooner or later. The Mother is always taking taking care of us and protecting us, whether we feel it or not, whether we realize it or not. Quote, O Mother Divine, thou art the eternal energy, the infinite source of the universe. Thy power is manifest in the infinite variety of names and forms. Being deluded by the power of ignorance, we forget thee, and take pleasure in the playthings of the world. But when we come to thee, take thy refuge and worship thee, thou makest us free from ignorance and worldliness, and giveth eternal happiness by keeping us, thine own children, on thy bosom. Unquote.
And that's the end of the chapter, I think. Are you in agreement?
Yes.
God, our eternal mother. So we have God immanent, we have God transcendent. In any event, if we can fill the screen with God, fill the screen. That's what they seem to be saying over and over again, different ways. Then we'll find the source of happy. And then, curiously enough, that's what Swami said. He'd been there, lower samadhi. We'll see God everywhere. Kind of like clouds or something. Beautiful cloud. The world is different to one of these souls of illumination. It's different. They see it differently. They see everything as God. So Swami used to say, look, when we talk about loving God, that don't mean you got to take your husband and throw him in the ocean, throw him in the sea. He actually used to say that. Stuff like that. But by finding out who it is really that you love, and daddy, or mommy, or the children for the parents, you find out that what you really love is Brahman. What you really love is God. And then little by gradually, who used to say that? Was that Swami Sridharananda from Australia? Little by little, you begin to see God in everyone. So you lose nothing, and you gain everything. Okay, Swami, what you got for us?
Well, you know, another thing that we might note at this point is that in the Catholic tradition, it seems like the vast majority of visions, at least the ones that are well known, are visions of the Virgin Mary.
That's a good point. Yes, that's a very good point. And there was a funny saying when I came, don't take any of this stuff too literally. Don't take anything literally. You know, St. Paul, he had it. And I'm sorry, that's why we country folk, in this country, we call him Paul. I'm sorry. We love y'all. And those of you to whom he got to be St. Paul, St. John, this is Paul. If you cannot pray like Peter, and you cannot preach like Paul, well, you could tell the people he lived to save us all every time I feel. So anyway, Paul, he had all these marvelous, marvelous presentiments. And somehow or another, he knew, he was quite a mystic, that if we put our love and faith in God and God alone, that then the whole world will be seen differently. All right, Mother. You don't lose nothing, you gain everything. So what do you got for us, Mother?
Our next chapter is chapter 12, Divine Communion.
Same book?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Good. Why did you?
It starts out with a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 21. He whose heart is unattached to the objects of senses, and whose soul is fixed in divine communion with Brahman, attaineth to bliss everlasting." Unquote. Divine communion, according to the Christian belief, is most intimately related to that ritual which is known by various names: the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, sacraments, or Mass. The general belief is that during the celebration of this ritual, the souls of those who partake in this holy service commune with each other as well as with Jesus Christ, the Son of God. In Matthew, we read, quote, "And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, 'Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins.'"
And that's from Matthew 26. Yeah. Okay. These words have given foundation to that memorial service, well, service of memory, called Holy Communion, in quotes, which was instituted by Jesus the Christ and which has been practiced by all the Christian nations for nearly 1900 years. That's interesting because he's writing this in 1920. Well, yes, he figured that Jesus might have lived in the year 33 or maybe 31 or something. But if we read the religious history of other nations, well, now here he goes, give him his ride, let him go on. Yes, you see, we read the history of other nations, but if we read the religious history of other nations, we find that the eating of bread, or the body of God, and the drinking of wine, or the blood of God, existed among pagan peoples many centuries before Christ was born. I'm just going to say I don't know. I'm not sure what particular things he's thinking about, and I'm not sure that I would feel the same way about them. And was practiced by the Greeks, Egyptians, Persians, and Hindus of the Vedic period. Do you think Vedic should be capital V there, brother?
Seems like it.
I do too.
Sounds like a capital idea.
Now, the readers of the comparative history of religions know that the Eucharist is one of the oldest rites of antiquity. Well, I'm an ignorant fella, so I'm just going to simply say this is unknown to me. All right? The Greeks called it the Illusionian Mystery. Now, this is a huge chapter, and it's really kind of shiver time, because the Greeks were not just simply rationalists. The left hemisphere, from which we get our science particularly, and a lot of other things, law, legal, analytical thinking, and we get that from the left brain of the Greeks. But there was a right brain. There was another trunk of the tree, whether the same roots, two trees. And that was the Dionysian side, that was the mystical side, the side of song and dance, because remember, they brought us theater, they brought us everything. And that was kind of chopped. It had an interesting career, that mystical side, after Christianity began to be permeating into the European world. So the idea of mystery is, in this case, a mystical term. On the island, actually, what's the name of the island? Not Corsica.
Crete.
No, the one starts with S, off the toe of the Sicily, yeah. Which was the Greeks' hot world. There was a marvelously mystical philosopher there. And so, anyway, the Illusionian Mystery, but it means the presence of God that you can feel. Reverend Robert Taylor said the Illusionian Mysteries were the most august of all the pagan ceremonies celebrated, especially by the Athenians, every 5th year in honor of Ceres, the goddess of corn. So yeah, I'm learning something.
Couldn't have been corn, but anyway.
Well, the goddess of corn Yeah, you see,
was
to
the
the
new
English.
world.
These people are all
Yeah.
writing in
Yeah.
English, not
Yeah.
American. Corn is wheat
Yeah.
to them.
Right.
All right. And even today, they call corn over there maize. Mhm. Who in allegorical language had given us her flesh to eat, just as Bacchus, the god of wine, in like sense had given us his blood to drink. And of course, that part is unknown to me, and frankly, I would prefer it remain that way. Prodicus, a Greek sophist. Oh boy, he knows he knows a lot of good things. Prodicus, a Greek sophist of the 5th century BC, that would be the 400s, says that the ancients worshipped bread as Demeter, that's Ceres, so you have Greek and Latin, and wine as Dionysius, Bacchus. Therefore, when they ate the bread and drank the wine after being consecrated, they're eating the flesh and drinking the blood of their deity. Well, it's getting closer. The Illusionian Mysteries were accompanied by many religious rites and ceremonies expressive of the purity and self-denial of the worshipper, and were therefore considered to be an expiation of past sins. Throughout the whole ceremony, the name of the Lord was repeated many times. Well, let's just leave it at that and say that that just shows that Swami knows so much more than I ever will, which is not surprising. Please go on, brother.
The ancient Egyptians annually celebrated the resurrection of Osiris, their savior and lord, and commemorated his death by eating bread and wine consecrated by the priest through many rites and ceremonies. The worshipper who partook of
Plural, huh? Plural.
worshippers
Oh, yeah.
who partook of this holy sacrament believed that the bread and wine became the veritable flesh and blood of their god Osiris. In Persia, many centuries before the birth of Christ, the worshippers of Mithra, and the footnote says Mithra, Mitra, Mitu, Itu, all the name of the sun god. And the reference was from I. M. Robertson.
No, you're not. Well, yes, you are. One with all. Yeah.
Who, according to the Parsis, was the mediator, redeemer, and savior of the world, took the sacrament of bread and wine with the same belief that the Christians do today.
Okay, now just a second. You understand when you're immersed, sort of hopefully like a donut in coffee, saturated with a cultural manifestation, which can be wildly proliferated in a country like America, even among Christians or specific groups of Christians. You have a very strong hold on what that symbolism means to you. So this is the problem that I'm having. It was a special moment, if you remember. It was Thursday night. And in the morning, Dolly Parton has a very interesting song. She's a great songstress and church person. That's the origin of her singing, as is that of many others, often African American in this country. And she has this song which I had her sing, recording on Easter one time, in which the Roman soldiers burst into the home. Ground floor. Nevertheless, he did some wonderful things. He washed the feet of the disciples on Thursday night. He said, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye shall love one another as I have loved you." And then he said, remember, you should love the Lord thy God with all thy strength, soul, mind, and strength. The heart, the 4 yogas. And thy neighbor as thyself, because the neighbor is thyself, you see, in the mystical understanding of Brahman being everything. Then he said, as they sat down for supper, just for the normal meal, which happened to be bread and wine. Bread and butter, country boy. I want you to remember me. He said, every time you sit down to eat. And then he said the words which gave the symbolism of the Holy Communion to the Christians. So we reserve the right in our privacy and our silence, the silence of our privacy, to hold those words in special esteem. Are you with me? And special content. All right, now having said that, Mithra is very important because Mithra is the sun god of the Middle East. Israel's part of the Middle East. Our Swami used to point out that Jesus was Asian. And there's a big hoo-ha. Now, this is history. In Rome, on the day of Mithra, the sun god. And undoubtedly it was connected, now that I think about it, Swami, with the return of the sun. It has to be connected with the winter solstice, the return of the sun. And so somebody, some Greek named fellow, Christian, and I think his name started with a T, he said, oh yeah, he said, we just picked that day out because there's so many people in Rome worshiping the sun god Mithra to hold our Christ Mass. Now, they weren't out to fool anybody. They weren't out to say that was Christ's birthday or nothing, but he's quite clear about it. That's why we picked that day, December 25th. Hey, looks like Jesus was probably born more like April because that's when. Are you with me? We're Christians here, you know. Mm-hmm. That's when the shepherds are out in their fields watching their flocks by night. So this is quite a chapter, and it requires a little leeway here for him. Would you like to take over that now, please, about Justin Martyr? Mm-hmm.
Justin Martyr, he's just reporting here what he's read about from these scholars. Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Renan, and other scholars believe that the Christian
That'd be
Eucharist,
Renan. That'd probably be our French. Yeah, our Frenchman. Yeah.
Renan. And other scholars believe that the Christian Eucharist was an imitation of the Persian ceremony, which was practiced by the worshippers of Mithra from most ancient times. In India, among the ancient Vedic sacrifices, we find one of special importance for remission of sins. It was the sacrifice of cake and wine. Cake was called the purodasha, and the wine was called the soma. This cake was made especially for this purpose, and it was round in shape. Its top resembled the body of resembling the back of a tortoise. It was considered to be the symbol of the body of Prajapati, the firstborn lord of all creatures, who sacrificed himself before creation for the good of all, and out of whose body the whole universe arose. The wine of the soma plant is described in the Vedas as the liquor of immortality, the giver of life and strength, or the water of life. It was called the nectar, Amrita, which purified the body and soul of all those who drank, and which conferred immortality upon them. The sacrificer in ancient times consecrated this cake, Purodasha, then cut it into pieces and chanted or singing chanting or singing the nature of the Lord threw each of those pieces into the sacrificial fire, and at the same time he poured consecrated wine into the fire. The remaining portions of the cake and wine were reverently eaten by the assembly family.
Okay, now I think this is important, Swami, and I'd like to offer it. I don't know if you noticed, but this program is coming to you from California. Now, Lord knows, India has more mystics on the head of a pin. They used to say how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, by the thousands. No doubt, probably, very likely, than the West, which followed the left hemisphere, the Greeks and so forth, all of that. And that's why the East and West coming together today are creating a new civilization, which Swamiji said Swami Vivekananda would be a very powerful one because of that synthesis. Of course it's true. What India has is the cascading fountain of superconsciousness, which we know nothing about practically. We have the waking state, the dreaming state, and the deep sleep state, and we went through that with Swami Abhedananda early on in our readings with him. Okay? And yet, the West has something. So this program is coming to you, my friends, from Hollywood, California. I think, just a suggestion from one person's point of view, that it might be well sometimes for the Westerner to think of India as another planet, the backside of the Earth, backside of the moon. And they, obviously, were definitely another planet. And you fly in on your spaceship and you come down, you land, and you find people there, people you can talk to, sort of, and you're naturally going to ask them sooner or later, do you believe in God? Do you have a God? And they'll tell you all about it. And until, as a matter of fact, God, a man God, a God man, so God saturated that like a big light bulb, a 1,000 watt clear glass light, you couldn't even see the glass because all you could see is the light. He named Krishna. He came to us one time, way time long ago. This is what he said. And this is what people think and say. Then you see, you can line it up and you can say, well, now that's interesting. Maybe I kind of like what they say over here, what Buddha said. I think I'll assimilate that in my meal to this smorgasbord. That's what Swamiji said we should do, assimilate anything we want to like that, make it part of our own integrity. But I have to stay as a child of the West. Though what he says is very interesting. With Jesus' special, meaning particular, species, genus and species, special emphasis, intention, intonation about what we call from the country churches communion. You go on, Swami. We're coming to it.
The sins of the past fortnight were confessed, repentance was expressed, forgiveness was asked, and when they drank the divine beverage, they thought that they were in communion with the heavenly King in spirit, and that they were one with the heavenly King and the Father of the universe. Every householder used to make this sacrifice at the end of each fortnight, and husband and wife performed it together, and ate the cake and drank the wine with the rest of the family. The rich and powerful employed the ordained priest to perform the sacrifice for them. Thus we see that the Holy Communion service was performed by the ancient nations for the expiation of their sins, even centuries before Christ instituted it among his disciples, and the ritual which is observed today by millions of the Christians all over the world was performed long before the time of Christ by many nations who had never heard of him. But the Hindus did not continue this practice, and they gave it up when the Vedic seer began to grasp more abstract...
Seers, perhaps.
Seers, yeah, perhaps. Began to grasp more abstract truths. Their truth-seeking minds could not rest contented with the sacrifices and ceremonials which were described in the Vedas. They gradually came to see that those sacrifices stood for something greater, and they tried to understand the spiritual significance. They searched for deeper knowledge of the mysteries of the universe and struggled for the realization of the true nature of the soul and its relation to God, who was the objective Lord and Father of the universe. at that time, they began to question whether or not God was objective and extra-cosmic, whether or not the soul was created by God. Those seekers after truth were gradually led beyond the old conceptions of an objective personal God who dwelt in heaven outside of nature. As their, I guess, right?
Yeah, sure.
Not or nature.
Right.
As they progressed higher and higher in spiritual researches and arrived at the Vedantic conception of God and the world, their meaning of the divine communion became higher and more spiritual. Well, of course, our home of fire has elements. You're giving, you offer all of your good, bad, and indifferent deeds. So there's that idea, even a remnant of that in our home of fire. There's no bread and wine, but that's the idea of sacrificing all of your actions is still in there. Good ideas just have a tendency to pop up
I'm
many
with
times.
You. Yeah, I'm with you. It's just that the heart, Blaise Pascal, a marvelous man. He and Erasmus are just two fascinating human beings. Erasmus stayed on the bus. He's called a humanist at the time of this marvelous resurgence of Risorgimento in Europe. He stayed within the Catholic Church, and Blaise Pascal kind of went over to the Protestants. But they were very similar people. And Blaise Pascal said the heart has reasons that reason knows not of. So the heart will leap to the depth of what Jesus was saying on Thursday night with an ascension of the soul that becomes an awareness of God. You see, it's not a thought, it's not, I don't know, it's a feeling, an awareness of the divine, a feeling, an experience. They actually say that if you can't, even for a split second, your mind gets real clear, you can see right at the bottom of the pool. They say that the clarified mind, like clarified butter in which you you boil out all the water from the butter and you call it ghee, G-H-E. Hey, the clarified mind is one with Brahman. So it's the encounter with God. That's what the mystics will say, and every religion, every denomination had its origin in mysticism. So the people that were still trying to feel it in their hearts on the frontier, they didn't have stained glass and windows and churches. They didn't have them. What they had was a charismatic preacher who may have followed the plow. And they'd get together for communion, like the Quakers, sitting in silence until they feel something on Sunday morning. Hey, please. I have to reserve that moment, that experiential moment of Jesus' word as very special and specific for me. Now, these other things could happen, and that's all fine. And particularly all of the Indian mythology, think of them as another planet. Hey, we come down. Whee, look at the people. Do you believe in God? Well, sure we do. Oh, yeah? What's your idea of God like? There we can make some. Okay, Swami, we're coming close. What you got for me?
Here we should remember that as long as God is extra cosmic or outside of nature, and he is far from us, there remains a vast gulf of separation between God and man. The more distant God is from us, the less chance there is for us to approach him and come into direct communion with him. Such being the conditions, the problem of divine communion does not arise in the minds of the followers of a religion which makes God unapproachable, as we find to be the case in two of the great religions of the world, Judaism and Islam. These two religions believe in an extra-cosmic, objective, and personal God, who is the all-powerful creator of the world and of the human souls. In Judaism, the conception of Jehovah is so transcendent, objective, and so strongly marked and majestic that there arose a vast sea of separation between Jehovah and the individual souls. The communion or approach of any individual to him was considered to be almost an insult to the deity. This difficulty, which such a conception produced, was understood and also felt for the first time by the Alexandrian Jews, like Philo and his followers, who were influenced by the Greek philosophy, and they tried to bridge over that sea of separation between God and man by accepting the Logos theory of the Greek philosophers.
Okay, now this is so near the crescendo that we really need to point it out. This is huge. Philo of Alexandria. It was he who said that the Logos was the first begotten of God. And we feel in Vedanta view that definitely when John said at the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, that he got it from the virtual contemporary Philo of Alexandria. So this part is all just marvelous, just movie. And we've had quite a bit to deal with tonight, Swami.
And of course, there's a whole mystical Jewish sects in the Kabbalah and so forth.
Oh, yes.
So,
oh, yes, and still are. And the consonants of the heart, the music that is made sounds so much like Vedantic music when we run into an old rabbi of that mystical tradition.
All right, I guess we'll close for this evening. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Peace, peace, peace.
So peace to you across the seas and wherever you may be. Here we are sitting around in a communion, a circle communion, all trying to approach closer in our understanding and our feeling to oneness with God.
All right, well, have to sign ourselves out here.
Why don't you just detach it? But
That's why I didn't get inside.